Okay, I want to start this video out with some breaking news. Looks like a lot of things are happening this morning after I did this video, so I'm adding this at the very beginning. So the video will happen in a few seconds here, but I want to acknowledge that there's some breaking news in Arizona with 35,000 extra votes being alleged there. Looks like Nevada lawsuit challenging the election is going to go ahead for December 3rd. Looks like Kraken Day is kicking off with Lynn Wood tweeting up some stuff. I haven't looked at that yet. And looks like even the odds makers in Vegas aren't paying this any attention in terms of paying out money for Biden. So that's all I gotta say, but let's continue on with the regular scheduled video. Hello, my name is Kyle and welcome to the channel. This is The Conservative Take, where we take culture, TV, movie, news, and politics and filter to you the right way. If this is your first time here, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And if you want to join the channel and support us in what we're trying to do, then please click the join button to find out how to do just that. Now in this video, as you see right here, this is my tide is turning video. And I'm going to try and go through this pretty quickly. I have a ton of information, but I don't want to belabor points I've already said over and over again, so I'm going to skip through a lot of stuff quickly, but just know there's a lot of stuff going on, and I want to cover some key points here. I'm going to cover some states, as usual. I'm going to cover 2 million paths to victory. That'll look familiar to some of you. Also, I'm going to update the states, talk about Biden's problem that he has going on and going forward, the different types of audits, because not every audit is made the same, and the main challenge we're going to be facing going forward, as always, and give an interesting perspective on all of this. All right, so again, we're diving right in. We're going full steam ahead. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania. We're going to talk about Michigan. We're going to talk about Wisconsin. We're going to talk about Georgia, a lot of Georgia actually, and a little bit of Arizona. And so here we're going to talk about the plan of attack. You've seen this before, but I want to reiterate this because the Trump campaign has 2 ways of going about it: the legal side and going after the state legislators to make sure they do their jobs based on the Constitution, Article 1, Section 4, and dealing with fraud and dealing with improper acts or improprieties when it comes to the legal side. Remember this slide we're going to talk about right here. So in terms of the legal side of this, the key is look at the fraud that's happening or the improprieties that are happening and flip the state. If votes shouldn't be there, then those states should go to Trump. It would be of a legal nature. And this is simply taking states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania and giving it over to Trump, because those states have processes, especially in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, that are clear violations, and that would give Trump the path to victory. In this particular scenario, it's 279. The others are great because he doesn't really need, Nevada and Arizona or Georgia in this scenario, for instance. The other side of that is going to be in the decertify side. This is going to be the state legislative role, because they're the ones ultimately who certify votes, not the Secretary of State. And here, you see they're all gray, all the states, but no one gets to 270. So based on the 12th Amendment in the Constitution, what happens there, it goes to the House of Representatives. Every state gets 1 delegate, 1 vote per state, and Trump has a majority there. He would win re-election there pretty easily. I'll talk about some caveats there later. So in terms of Georgia, on the legal front, the Kraken is going to be released based on what Sidney Powell's been saying, what Lynn Wood's been saying, that there's going to be so much shocking evidence presented today. Actually, it's going to be so shocking and it hasn't been made public yet that it's going to be of biblical proportion. So looking forward to seeing that. So in terms of Georgia, the Secretary of State there, his name is Brad Raffensperger, and he's been nothing but an obstructionist the entire time. And this guy has been basically thwarting everything the Republicans have been trying to do. They went ahead and certified the votes in Georgia. We'll talk about what that means and what it doesn't mean. But what that did was it alerted the Republicans in Georgia, the state legislator that is, to step up and now asking for a full audit along with the governor, Kemp. And so this will be the 3rd recount. The other ones were just counting bad votes. This will be a full audit, because if you look at it, only 0.24% of the mail-in ballots were rejected. And that's way lower than a percentage of typically 3%. If you look at 2016, it was 3%. Where you lack chain of custody for the mail-in ballots. This is very common for this sort of thing because people fill it out improperly. And then next thing you know, that ballot gets invalidated and gets kicked out. And so that's interesting to know, especially in this particular election where it's been 6 times more ballots than ever. In this case, you have 40,000 votes that should be tossed if you just average those numbers out in terms of just averages. Okay, because we know for a fact that the Secretary of State did not verify signatures. And so with Trump being only down by 12,000, Georgia is easily in the ball game In fact, it's pretty much a certainty that Trump would win Georgia. Like I said, he refused to certify these signatures. This is Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, and basically on the recommendation of Stacey Abrams, as we know, ran for governor and lost, ironically saying that she didn't get a fair vote because of voter fraud. That's what she's saying. That's Georgia. So a lot going on there. Again, that thing should be released today. That lawsuit, that Kraken, should be released today. And we'll find out about that. I may do a live stream once that gets released. All right, so Pennsylvania, Secretary of State there is Kathy Buchlovar. Again, this is going to be a similar type of model here. Same kind of thing. This case is a Democrat. The other guy was a RINO, but essentially the same thing. What happened here is they filed a suit, that is the Trump team, filed a suit in Pennsylvania to delay the certification process. That was thrown out, of course, and then the Secretary of State, Miss Kathy Buchlovar, certified the votes. This was to be expected because we know it's going to happen. This was pretty much a delaying tactic to allow the Trump campaign to slow it down, because here's how it works. The state can certify the votes through the Secretary of State, basically saying, okay, we give our stamp of approval that this was a fraud, this was a valid election. It was, all of our I's are dotted and all our T's are crossed to be certified in that regard. They've not done any of that. They're just rushing this thing through. Why? Because once the state certifies the votes, then the state legislator has the ability to elect or appoint electors, which are the people who actually vote for the president. And so, but here's the thing, the Secretary of State doesn't do that. So when you hear in the mainstream media that a state certified a vote, well, it doesn't really mean anything because it comes down to the state legislators. So if the state does not certify the vote, meaning if they don't elect electors to DC for the vote, then guess what? There is no certification in the state. Ultimately, again, it goes back to the state legislators. So a gentleman by the name of Doug Mastriano, he is from the Majority Policy Committee. This guy is, from what I understand, is a true patriot and is looking to do full audit, full evidence hearings, and this thing to make sure that the state legislators know enough information to consider, and they're considering this, to not even electing electors. And what does that mean? It means they just don't, no one gets Pennsylvania. No one wins it. And if no one gets to 270, then no one can become president. That goes into the 12th Amendment of the Constitution, where it goes to the House, as I mentioned before. Okay, so let's go on here a little bit more. This particular hearing that they're going to set up here in Pennsylvania, led by Doug Mastriani of the Majority Policy Committee, they're going to be looking at witnesses from Montgomery County. We talked about that in a video yesterday about how that county was egregious, how they just had votes just vanish. Go check out that video from yesterday on that one. Also, Giuliani is going to be presenting, all the evidence will be presented to the people who it means in the state legislature. They're the only ones that really matter. They're going to be seeing that evidence, and so that should be interesting. What evidence are we talking about here? Well, just for starters, thousands of provisional ballots that were falsified, the ignoring of the provision or the ruling by Alito to segregate the ballots that come after the deadline, that was disregarded. You can look that up. I think that's Alito 77. Lawful votes. Well, in that case, Trump would win by about 300,000 votes. We talked about this before in other videos. So just to give you some perspective here. Michigan. Michigan's another big one. David Coleman from the Great Lake Justice Center filed a suit a while back to, again, delay certification for the same reason before, because fraudulent votes slow it down so you can't elect electors. Well, what happened with there was, this is kind of the timeline. So now they're looking at doing a second hearing in Michigan because the first one got denied, and we'll talk about it in a second. So essentially what happened there was that Coleman filed an injunction to stop certification, same way this happened in Pennsylvania. All right. Next, what happened was Wayne County certified. We know about that, about how they certified and they didn't certify and then certified again because the two GOP were harassed. The two canvassers in the GOP were harassed, and they had to sign affidavits after the fact saying, well, we did it under duress. But nevertheless, they certified Wayne County. And then the Supreme Court stepped in and said, look, we looked at Coleman's case. We know we tossed it out, but there's so much evidence in here. It's so crazy and insane. And the affidavits that are in this particular suit were so insane that they're going to look at it again. And this particular lawsuit wasn't just your willy-nilly person on the street. It included former Michigan Secretary of States, former Michigan Attorney Generals who eyewitness fraud in Michigan. We'll cover some of that fraud in a second here. And so we have people, Hall of Fame type people in Michigan who are government officials who saw and are swearing under the penalty of perjury that they saw fraud. Very, very important. So what happens then? The Supreme Court told Coleman to refile your case because we want to bring that so we can look at the evidence. So they're going to try and do a evidentiary review to present the evidence, same way they're doing it in Georgia, same way they're going to be doing it in Arizona, and so forth, because it is so egregious. So what would be the next step after that? Well, the next step would be to have a possible joint session where Michigan says, you know what, we're not going to appoint electors. And we're just going to sit back and let the House take care of that. And again, that's in Trump's favor. So what kind of evidence are you talking about here? Well, people were threatened. We have people who were backdating absentee ballots. You have poll workers were told not to look for any problems on the ballots. And there were thousands of ballots that came in at 4 o'clock in the morning in a truck. People witnessed this. There was no oversight. These ballots were triple counted in some cases. And they have 220 plus affidavits, including the people I mentioned before, the former Attorney General and the former Secretary of State, sworn witness testimony saying they saw violations all over the place. Insane. Wisconsin jumps down there about 20,000 there in Wisconsin. We mentioned before that in Wisconsin, you must apply for a ballot. There's no mailing it in randomly. There must be a corresponding written request, and there's not. There is no vote. In Milwaukee, you had 60,000 invalid ballots. In Madison, Wisconsin, you had 40,000 invalid ballots. And like I said before, no application, no ballots. This is Wisconsin law, open shut case. Going to Arizona, Trump is down there in 10,000 in Arizona. And Maricopa County has a lot of major problems here. And actually in Arizona, they're actually going to do a meeting next week, I believe, where they're going to look at some of the evidence. This is going to be Monday. So Monday, they're going to have a committee meeting to review the evidence in Arizona, the same way they're doing it in Michigan, Pennsylvania, the same way they're doing it in Georgia. So these are huge things going on here. The next day we'll have, after that, will be a special session to the Arizona legislature, which will be the same process as before, to say we're not going to send our votes to DC. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen. We're going to talk about this later on in this video, but that's sort of the process. I'm stepping you through how things are and why the certification by the Secretary of States of these states really doesn't mean anything. It means really absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. So again, in Arizona, they may have an audit as well, still possible. So Arizona is still very much in play, being only down by 10,000. You can see that. So the remaining key points here are Biden's problem here. Biden's problem simply is this, that even if there's no fraud whatsoever proven or whatever, there's still process violations that happens. Like Judge Alito saying for the Supreme Court, segregate those ballots. If you don't do it, then guess what? Toss them out. Or in Wisconsin, we have the 100,000 absentee ballots that don't have verifiable authorship from those. Those can be tossed. So even without the fraud, Biden's got a huge problem. Either way, he ends up losing in those two scenarios that I mentioned earlier. All right. Also, there are two types of audits. One is a process audit. The other is a results audit. Results basically count the ballots and look for chain of custody. The process audits are simply saying, was the process handled properly? Were people who were supposed to be doing it state legislators making the decisions and not judges, Secretary of States, etc., who are outside of the Constitution? What happened there? So either way, it looks good from a process standpoint and from a result standpoint. The main challenge here is feckless and weak Republicans. This falls apart if we have Romney's amok. All right. If that happens, then it's game over but the key thing is if the MAGA support continues to pressure and lets them know, look, guys, not only is it, and ladies, not only is it this, your jobs and the party that's at stake here, it's also the country in terms of voter confidence and just our republic. Without free elections, we can't have a country. And so we're seeing now that Republicans are starting to step up in small pockets here, but the strong pockets that are pushing back on this and saying, hey, this isn't right. Let's look at this evidence because we can't certify this. And if the state Secretary of State registered or certified the votes, the state legislator is the one responsible. Again, if they do not appoint electors, there is no certification. Don't let anyone in the news tell you otherwise. And also, the interesting perspective here is that this is not the first time this has happened. Back in the 1800s, you had Adams and Jackson, and you had Jefferson and Adams. So those two cases were John Quincy Adams against Jackson and Thomas Jefferson against John Adams. Those both elections went to the House of Representatives. It was not decided by electors. So there is precedent being set. And so what I would say here is the other things here to deal with, that we have several hearings coming up. One today in Pennsylvania. We have Arizona, a meeting on Monday, and a meeting in Michigan for Tuesday. And all those meetings are going to be to look at the evidence, to find out what's going on. And again, if the state legislators of those particular states, who are, by the way, controlled by Republicans, step up and man up and woman up, then guess what? There's no way Trump can lose this. There's no way that Biden can get to 270. It'll go to the House of Representatives, where they, again, going back to the situation before, that Trump will win there in the House of Representatives. So what I would say basically is just turn the TV off and watch what's going on locally, and look for Pennsylvania particularly today, and look for Georgia today, because that should be really interesting to see what happens. But that's where we stand here in this particular process. I hope this makes sense. And let me know if this is helpful. And let me know, because I can do more of these. I may do another one today once the Kraken suit gets released. Let me know. It's very interesting. All right. So if you like what I do in this channel, let me know. And click that like and subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any future content. And until next time, maybe later on today, I will talk to you guys